Dober večer in pozdravljeni v oddaji Pogovor in pika z veleposlanikom Združenih držav Amerike z gospodom Josephom Usumeljem. Welcome, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you.
Pozdravljeni, gospod veleposlanik. Kako bi v nekaj stavkih opisali danes Združene države Amerike?
It's a very boisterous, very optimistic, very unrefined but very warm country.
Volitve so za vami, imate novega starega predsednika in kot vemo, ste njegovo zmago tudi pričakovali.
Yes, I was betting on his victory.
Yeah,
I couldn't say anything before time, of course, but I think for both America and for the world, this is the best possible outcome, for sure.
Dobili pa ste tudi $50, ne?
Actually, $100, yes, from my brother who's a Republican.
Kaj pomeni ponovna zmaga demokratskega kandidata za Ameriko?
For America, I think it means continuity. It also means that you have someone who's there who already understands the problem, so he doesn't have to be educated, and he knows how to work with the Republicans. So I think he'll be somebody who, like your own country, in America we're very divided between left and right. But I think Obama will be able to bridge that and we'll have a much better atmosphere in America now.
Ameriški borzni indeksi padajo po izvolitvi Obame. Ali je to razlog za ta padec ali je kje drugje vzrok temu?
I don't know, I'm no expert on this, but in November often there are downturns in the stock market, but I don't think of it as anything serious at all. Whatever the reason, it's temporary.
Kakšna je situacija pa danes v Ameriki po volitvah? Verjetno se pripravljate na čiščenje hiše?
Well, since it's a continuous administration from the last time, I don't think there'll be many changes. Certainly the Secretary of State will change because she's tired and she wants to leave. And of course in CIA and elsewhere there'll also be changes, but I don't foresee any real dramatic changes in either policy or personnel.
Kakšne pa so ameriške zunanje politične prioritete?
I think the priorities may change a little this time. I think that the euro crisis will become more serious and it'll take more attention. So I think that President Obama and America in general will be focusing even more on Europe. I also think that with the first phase of the Arab Spring over, that there'll be more attention to developing real democracies in the Arab world. And of course China continues to grow and become stronger, so we'll have to engage even more with them.
Kar bo verjetno tudi spodbudilo dolar, da bo zopet se ustoličil in dobro stal, ne, v primerjavi z ostalimi tekmicami, ne?
Well, I think that's very true. American exports are up dramatically over the last year, and I think that once we resolve our deficit problem in the next few weeks, I hope, the dollar will become even stronger.
Kako ocenjujete odnose med Združenimi državami in Evropsko unijo?
I think they're good. They're always good, but they could always be better too. I think it's more worrisome what the relationships are within the EU than what the United States' relationship is to it. We quite rightly believe that without the EU, without the stability and prosperity of the EU, it's a great danger to the United States. So I do think there'll be more focus on the EU in the year ahead.
Katere so najpomembnejše trgovinske partnerice Združenih držav?
Well, if we include the EU as one partner, then that's the most important. That's where most of the trade is still. If we're talking about individual countries, then of course China and Japan and increasingly Russia and the other BRIC countries.
Kako sodelujete, kako ocenjujete sodelovanje z BRIC deželami, mislim skupino dežel z BRIC?
With the United States?
Yes.
Well, I don't think there's any... The BRIC countries are not like the EU. I mean, we may laugh and joke about the EU not having a consistent policy, but at least the EU has consistent values, and they really are a family of democracies. The BRIC countries are very different cultures, different ideologies even, and different histories. So there's no real cohesion there, except in that their economies are doing well.
Ampak gospodarstvo Združenih držav je vezano pravzaprav na države skupine BRIC, ne?
Absolutely. They're very important. They're so dynamic and they're so large that we have to embrace them. You always have these two choices in life. You could either run away and hide and try to protect yourself, or you could come out in the open and embrace whatever the problem or opportunity is. I wish Slovenia would do more of that. And so, yeah, I think America has to deal with them in a very straightforward way.
Nekateri ameriški analitiki menijo, da bo prišlo do gospodarske upočasnitve rasti tudi za države BRIC. Se strinjate s tem?
Only because of Sir Isaac Newton. You just always assume things can't keep going up. They have to go down sooner or later. So yeah, on that basic principle of physics, it would seem that even those dynamic economies must start falling or at least slowing down.
Kakšna je zastopanost ameriških podjetij tukaj v Sloveniji, lahko tudi ameriških izdelkov, proizvodov?
Very little, unfortunately. Even though Slovenia is a very ideal market in many ways, the impediments to foreign investment and foreign trade are so serious that we have very little investment and very little trade.
Kako pa je za gospodarsko zbornico? Kakšna je pravzaprav vloga ameriške gospodarske zbornice pri nas? Ali igra svojo vlogo? Imamo doprinos tega pri nas?
Yeah, you know, I've been in the Foreign Service over 30 years and we interact with AmChams all over the world. I would say, without any question, this is the best AmCham I've ever worked with in my whole career. They're remarkably dynamic and intelligent and objective about what the situation is. So I do think they have a role because they can bring American foreign investment here. They can also help increase the open dialogue about what needs to be done for the Slovene economy.
Imate kakšen nasvet, kako bi lahko slovensko gospodarstvo spodbudili, da bi nastopali enakopravno in seveda konkurenčno na ameriškem trgu?
Yeah, some of them already are. The small, dynamic, private ones are. The ones that aren't are the state-owned ones, or the ones where the state is too much in control of the management. So the first thing that has to be done is they need to be privatized. They have to be truly sold in such a way that protects Slovenes' interests, but ensures that the government, regardless of whether it's a right-wing or left-wing government, can no longer interfere in their operations. Because many of them are not run as businesses now. They're run as appendages to the government. And that is why Slovenia is in the predicament it's in right now. So privatize them and then allow them to compete. Slovenia will have no trouble competing. Per capita, Slovenia has more talented people than any other country I know of. There's not going to be any issue if the government would stop shackling their companies.
Katera dejavnost pa bi bila lahko bolj izpostavljena za lažji vstop na ameriško tržišče?
The ones that have succeeded so far are little high-tech companies. I mean, admittedly, Slovenia is a very small population, but it does have a remarkable number of high-tech companies that can compete very well in the international market. And there's frankly a lot of American companies that are interested in investing in those companies here. I think that's one big area that they could do very well in. But even within the domestic market and for the region, there's a lot of Slovene companies that could do much better if they weren't in government hands.
Kako ocenjujete slovenske ukrepe v boju proti krizi?
You know, I often say, and I think it's very true, that America and Slovenia have the same problem. And it's not an economic one, it's a political one. You could look at a lot of other countries in the world where they have genuine economic problems that are going to be very hard to fix. For Slovenia, as with America, all it takes is a little political maturity and a little political will. And if you had that, you could fix it quite easily. I think the proposals that have been made by the government are generally good ones. There's room for a little compromise. There certainly needs to be some sort of investment as well, some way to jumpstart the economy. But to get rid of, to work on the deficit for both our countries is very important. So I think in general, the proposals that are being made are sensible and frankly will make it much less painful for Slovenia in a year or two.
Lahko se spomnimo, da sta bila Clinton in Bush v Sloveniji. Kdaj lahko pričakujemo obisk Obame pri nas?
Well, I would love that. It would be a wonderful thing. I think the last time a president came here was for an EU summit or NATO summit, and it's unfortunate that they have not gotten here. I know that, you know, when Mr. Pogovor was Prime Minister, he met with President Obama in the White House, and both he and Vice President Biden said they wanted to come to Slovenia. Mm-hmm. I suppose they say that to every Prime Minister who comes to visit, but it seemed genuine to me that they would like to. It's just a matter of finding time. Maybe if you had a big crisis, they'd have a better reason to come.
Čeprav tujci nam ponovadi rečejo, da nismo še tako v globoki, težki krizi, ne, da se niti ne zavedamo, da še vedno živimo dokaj dobro.
Yeah, I think they're right to some extent, and I often make fun of Slovenes too for being so pessimistic. It's still a very beautiful country, it's still a very safe country. No one is really starving to death. Most countries I've been in, there's people dying on the streets every day when they have streets, and usually they don't even have streets. So Slovenia is very well off relative to most of the world. On the other hand, I'm married to somebody who's very much Slovene in her temperament, and she always complains to me and says, because I always complain and say, all you do is complain, you're never happy, you're never satisfied. And she says, the problem is people like me, because we're too easily satisfied. So we'd still all be living in caves with no running water and no electricity. It's the people who are dissatisfied who actually improve the world. Mm-hmm. And in that sense, Slovenes, maybe they're not happy, but they certainly improve the world.
Veliko slovenskih študentov se odloča za študij v Ameriki. Mi lahko mogoče poveste, kakšne možnosti imajo in koliko vedno več jih je baje, ne? Torej, v Sloveniji je trend bega možganov čez mejo.
Well, the brain drain is always a danger, for sure, for any country, because America is so big and comfortable and rich that people want to go there and then they get addicted to the lifestyle. Slovenia used to never be that way. As you know, Slovenes, you could never get them to leave Slovenia for very good reasons. But the economic pull is now great. I think the American university system is one of the best things about America, because it's very open and very dynamic. And there's so many different types of universities. There's something for everybody. Here you're sort of stuck, especially if you want to be in social sciences. It's the same professors from the Yugoslav days, and you can't get any new views and perspectives on life or theory or philosophy, which is unfortunate. Slovenes have a great advantage. They all speak better English than I do. So that makes going to university in America very easy. And frankly, it depends on the university, but many of them give out scholarships. I know the college that my two older children went to, Middlebury College, prides itself on having the absolute maximum number of foreign students. They take it as a matter of pride that they only have 80% Americans and 20% foreigners. Hundreds of universities feel the same way, that it's good they don't want all the Americans being so incestuous. They want foreigners there to give them a broader outlook. So for Slovenes who already speak English so well, and who do so well in academia, it's easy to go to an American university. And frankly, I wish we would do the other way. I think one of the big impediments to your country, education-wise, is that you have this stupid rule or maybe it's even in your constitution, that learning has to be in Slovene. If you would have university just change it to English, you would have thousands of foreigners wanting to come to your country to learn. And that would be a very easy thing to do.
Povejte mi, kako predstavite Slovenijo Ameriki?
I tell them quite honestly that they'll find that Slovenes are extraordinarily honest, extraordinarily polite, extraordinarily hardworking and intelligent. But they should not take that to mean that they're like Americans at all, because they're not as extroverted. They're very polite, but they're not as warm when you first meet them. In a way, they're less superficial. They're less shallow. You don't meet a Slovene and say they're your friends 30 minutes later. It just doesn't happen. It's a much more complicated culture, and that's sort of nice in a way. I'm used to being places where everyone's laughing all the time and everyone's thinks they're happy even though they may be starving to death. So Slovenia is sort of a refreshing change for me.
Pa Amerika pozna Slovenijo? Poznajo Američani našo deželo?
Not all of them, no. More and more of them do. You're getting an incredible amount of good publicity in the New York Times and other magazines and newspapers as sort of one of the hidden gems of Europe. And no American ever comes here and doesn't like it. We even have people in jail here who are so happy to be in your jails. They never want to leave.
You mean terrorists or really?
No, just everyday criminals.
Okay, smugglers.
They're treated so well, they're happy.
Ali vas obiskujejo sorodniki medtem, ko ste v službi v Sloveniji?
Yeah, the first year it was amazing. I had, that first summer I had visitors every week. Literally for 12 or 14 weeks, I was getting sick of visitors. So I think 3 of my siblings have visited, and 6 or 7 of my best friends have visited, and a bunch of other people also, who just decided they were friends because they wanted to come to Slovenia. But yeah, it's close, and it's, as I said, it's safe, and it's so centrally located. It's just a wonderful place for Americans to visit.
Kaj vas je najbolj presenetilo v Sloveniji? Vas je sploh kaj presenetilo?
Several things, really.
Really?
One was I had been told how wonderful the country is, but it's really breathtaking. That was, even though I had been warned, it was just even nicer than I thought. I also was warned that it would be claustrophobic, that it's so small, but that hasn't turned out to be true, so I was surprised. I've been here 2 years now, and there's still places I need to see in Slovenia. The one bad surprise I found is that nobody had told me before I came about the divisiveness in the society. Nobody had talked about the old history from World War II or the animosities between left and right. It was like it was a dark secret in Washington. Nobody wanted to tell the new ambassador. So I think those are the 3 main surprises. Yeah.
Pa radi spregovorite mogoče vi o drugi svetovni vojni?
Always.
Always.
I think it's very important, therapeutic and cathartic to not talk about things. Maybe I've read too much Freud, but I think that it's very bad to keep things under the carpet. And I think that one of the problems with Slovenia is that it was under a communist state for too long, and people couldn't talk about things. And even now, people are comfortable doing so. But I think from our own experience as Americans, I think we got over the Civil War a lot quicker. Meaning it took us 50 years, but that's a lot quicker because we talked about it and we argued about it. And we had monuments to the south and monuments to the north, and we were able to come to respect each other. And none of that happened in Slovenia for so long that I think it has created a psychological problem with the whole country. So I talk about it, even if it gets people angry.
Po rodu ste Italijan, prihajate iz Sicilije.
Yes.
Yes.
Sicilian, not Italian.
Ampak govorite pa italijansko ali ne?
I don't. I was the fifth of six children. My older brothers and sisters speak Sicilian, but I don't. No.
Sicilijo povezujemo ponavadi z mafijo in z botrom. A ste obiskali vasico Don Corleone na Siciliji?
No, I've only been to Sicily once, and no, I've gone back to the town of Musameli, which I don't know if it's also a mafia town, but no, I have no interest in going to Corleone.
A so te vaše italijanske korenine mogoče prednost v diplomatskem svetu?
Only in the sense that by genetics I'm a good liar.
Ali ženskar mogoče?
Yeah, that too. Good attributes.
Kako ponavadi preživljate prosti čas tukaj pri nas v Sloveniji?
The little I have, I try to spend with my family. We have two older children, but we also have an adopted boy from the Philippines who's now 8 years old. So this is my chance to actually be a father and have time with my family. So there's a lot of places to go, and whenever I have the chance, like we're taking a trip to Sicily, and we went to Florence a couple of weeks ago, and we travel all over Slovenia all the time.
Vem, da pišete pesmi. Ali ste kakšno od teh pesmi posvetili Sloveniji ali saj jo opisali?
I've written a couple of poems while in Slovenia. I'm still working on them to make sure they're politically correct enough to. And long ago, 40 years ago, when I was hitchhiking through, I wrote a poem about Yugoslavia, which I actually had published once 40 years ago.
Kaj res v Jugoslaviji ste? In ste bili uspešni pri temu avtostopiranju čez Jugoslavijo?
It was actually really amazing because I had hitchhiked through England and Germany and France and Italy and all these countries that were NATO allies, and it's 1973, so they were all very anti-American because of the Vietnam War. And then I crossed over into Slovenia and Yugoslavia, and everyone was nice. It was a great contrast to go from the NATO allies who were all grumpy. And so, yes, I had a nice time. I traveled down the Dalmatian coast through Macedonia to Greece. And next year will be the 40th anniversary, so I'm hoping to hitchhike again. It's not funny, it's true. Even though my wife is threatening me with divorce, I thought I would try for the 40th anniversary to go through all the former republics.
Kako ste takrat videli Jugoslavijo in danes Slovenijo?
But you know, it was very quick. I think it only took me like 4 or 5 days to travel through, because my destination was the Parthenon and Thermopylae, and I didn't know much. In fact, I thought Yugoslavia was one country. And the thing I remember most about my travels in '73 was how all the young people told me Yugoslavia wasn't going to last. Back in 1973, and I didn't know what they meant, because as an ignorant American, I thought it was one cohesive culture. And now, I mean, the other thing I remember about traveling through Yugoslavia is the women were lovely, and everyone wanted to buy my blue jeans. It was just ridiculous. I could have sold my blue jeans for $100. But other than that, it was just a very peaceful, pleasant place.
V komunizmu je jeans bil zmeraj največje poželenje, kar jih je bilo možno.
Yeah, I didn't know that until I got here. Yes.
Pa ste si kdaj mislili, da boste prišel nazaj in tukaj službovali kot diplomat?
No, never. At that time, I was very angry with America too, so I had decided to come to Europe and never go back to America. I was ready to I was offered a job in Wales as a bricklayer, and I had planned to never be anything but a bum.
Kaj ni vaš oče služboval v Vietnamu?
He served in World War II and in Korea, and one of my brothers served in Vietnam. I refused, yeah.
Zaradi osebnih razlogov verjetno, ne?
Yeah, I was against the war, but I was in a very difficult situation because I didn't like the war, but I didn't like the anti-war demonstrators either. So I didn't fit in with anybody, so I thought I would just leave for Europe.
Slišala sem, da igrate golf, pa me zanima, kdo je vaš najljubši tekmec v golfu?
Yeah, you know, that's just not really, I have played golf 5 or 6 times in my whole life. My older children wrote that Wikipedia page, and I've made them delete that because I'm just a terrible golfer.
It's not deleted yet.
It's still not deleted.
Še ni zredirano, niti izbrisano.
It's crazy. I'm terrible.
Imate kakšno misel ali sporočilo za naše gledalce?
Well, since it's almost the Christmas season and the end of the year, I'd like to just wish them all a good, blessed Christmas, and I hope that they'll all have a very successful year. I think that there's much reason to be optimistic in this country. You should all be proud of your country, and I think the new year will bring many good surprises to Slovenia.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Hvala tudi vam, ki spremljate našo oddajo. Želimo vam še naprej prijeten večer in lahko noč.